Zelenskyy was stunned with a statement and criticized the United States for leaking super-secret information. Why are the Americans doing this? Are they really ready to give up Ukraine and agree to the occupation of our country? What is happening now around the struggle for the presidency of America? Will there be riots after the elections? We will not only talk about this with our guest Boris Pincus, public figure, president of the Republican Ronald Reagan Club, on our air. Boris Yakovlevich, hello.
Good afternoon, dear. Glad to be on your channel, and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. The elections in the United States are, of course, the key topic of our broadcast, but I would like to start with this. Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy confirmed that in the secret part of our victory plan, he requested Tomahawks from the United States, as previously reported by the New York Times. Zelenskyy reproached the White House for leaking this information to the press. I quote, "Do you see what is happening in the media now? This was confidential information between Ukraine and the White House. How do you understand these messages? This means that there is nothing secret between the partners," Zelenskyy said. Boris Yakovlevich, I want to ask you, why is this really necessary? And what is happening now?
Of course, to be honest, this leak does not work in favor of Ukraine. This train is for one purpose only, which is not to give Tomahawks. That's the first thing. Let me remind you, Tomahawks are long-range missiles with a range of up to 1,500 kilometers. They are 5 times superior to the attacks that Ukraine asks for. Therefore, Tomahawks would be very necessary today in Ukraine, more than ever. Moreover, look, the situation is escalating with the arrival of cannon fodder from North Korea. Please do not believe these 10-12,000. There is already talk of 100,000 who may soon come to Ukraine, this one to Russia, and then in parts to Ukraine. This is what it is. This is what is happening. The situation is escalating. In my opinion, I'm going to step back a little bit. Since we've touched on classified information, everything is going for the best. And thank God that North Korea has appeared here. Why will this hasten Putin's end? Why? Because the West will not be able to tolerate this anymore. Europe is on its ears. This is 100%. And, of course, there is a struggle in our elite. What to do, how to behave. On the one hand, we will have elections in less than a week, and even if the elections end, for example, in favor of Trump, who, I very much hope, will fulfill his duties as president, a global leader, and, as he promised, will put everything in its place, protecting America's national interests, for example, but he will take office as president as early as January 20th next year. That is, almost 3 months, my friends. This is terrible. And this leak, with which we began our conversation today, is alarming. Alarming why? Because this wave that is re-emerging in the West and, above all, around Biden, this vegetable who has not made any decisions for a long time, makes decisions for him. Most likely, Obama is there. It is Obama, the puppeteer, who is the Pahan of the Democrats, who makes the decision. And Obama is known as the so-called, in quotation marks, peacemaker who seeks to make concessions. I don't want to remind you what contacts he had with both Putin and Medvedev, to whom he promised in his ear, just be patient, then we will come to an agreement. And this is a continuation of the same. And this is what worries me. But on the other hand, we already have conversations among the generals who tell both the Biden administration and congressmen that this cannot be tolerated any longer. The situation is escalating, and I think that something very important should happen immediately after November 5th. I apologize to November, when, God willing, we pray that Trump will win, and there will already be movements towards helping Ukraine so that it can simply change the course of the war not only on its territory, but also on the territory of Russia, where 250 square kilometers, as experts say, is occupied by everything, and their hostilities should be conducted more actively.
Вот 250 квадратных километров, как говорят эксперты, занято ВСУ, и там боевые действия должны вестись более активно.
So that Putin's clique, this regime, does not think about further military action on the territory of Ukraine itself. Moreover, there are very interesting rumors. I think perhaps they take place. Rumors that Qatar has allegedly already achieved that Russia and Ukraine are allegedly conducting behind-the-scenes negotiations to stop attacks on the energy centers of both countries. That is, this is exactly what Zelenskyy recently spoke about.
Boris Yakovlevich, excuse me, this information about the reports and agreements for the mediation of Qatar and Qatar was denied today in the Russian Federation, and also in the office of the President of Ukraine. Our sources report that this is allegedly a special information operation of Russia.
Yes, quite possibly. But, probably, there is no smoke without fire. It is possible that there are the first attempts to probe the situation. Why is it not only Ukraine, my friends, but also Russia that is interested in this? Do you know that Ukraine will not stop attacking Russia's oil infrastructure, that the armed forces of Ukraine are doing this successfully today, and other, those centers that are, helping in the aggression of the Russian army on the territory of Ukraine? Therefore, all this is taken together, there is mutual interest. Moreover, winter is coming, and Russia needs its energy infrastructure no less than Ukraine itself, and the people do not complain, do not take to the streets. Russia is no less interested in this than Ukraine. So there is mutual interest here, and I think that in time there will be new planted stories about at what stage, if this really takes place, at what stage this process is. Let's see how it turns out. And at the same time, whether this will be real will depend once again on Western assistance to Ukraine. The more aggressive Ukraine is not only on its territory occupied by Russia, but also on the territory of the same Kursk region, and even attacks other territories of Russia, even with the introduction of troops, the more Putin will be inclined to Zelenskyy's proposal to start, for example, to stop with this, to attack the energy centers of both countries.
I will now add what our source says. In general, within the framework of the peace formula, of course, we need to restore energy security, food security and all other aspects of security, as has been repeatedly said. The problem is that the Russians do not really want this at this stage either. Especially when, as we have already said, the armed forces of Ukraine are in the Kursk region and Putin declares this, which, at least, the Financial Times also wrote that it is unlikely that Putin will agree to any agreements even on energy facilities as long as the armed forces of Ukraine are on Russian territory.
No, quite the opposite. For example, we are lobbying in order to strengthen the position of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region and even go further. To go further so that Ukraine's position grows, this is how it should be, there can be no other way. Why is Russia allowed everything it is doing today on the territory of Ukraine, and Ukraine is not allowed? Where has this been heard? And all this depends on the West today. And here I will add you very interesting news. The leaders of South Korea are arriving in Washington. Today or tomorrow negotiations will be held on the participation of South Korea in providing assistance to Ukraine. South Korea is categorically determined, very, even to the point of sending its troops. At the beginning, this week, a group of South Korean observers arrives, which will observe the behavior of North Korean troops. This is very interesting. Therefore, South Korea is more interested than anyone else in what is happening in Ukraine today. Therefore, we should not be surprised that there will be a war between two Koreans on the territory of Ukraine. This can be the case. Therefore, the West, the more the West carves, the more the West is ceremonious. So, to give or not to give, maybe you don't need to. And why is it needed today? We need to think about other problems. Sit down at the negotiating table, force Zelenskyy. This is what is weighing on the minds of the Western leaders of the Biden administration. But South Korea does not give rest. She says that if you do not take measures to help Ukraine with the necessary types of weapons, and South Korea itself is already directly ready to provide weapons, then, however, there is South Korean legislation, adopted according to which South Korea does not have the right to send weapons to hotspots. But I would like to remind you that South Korea is one of the top 10 countries in terms of the number of military weapons and equipment produced and exports, and this is very important. South Korea is very popular in the world, so South Korea has something to supply to Ukraine, and I think that today it will be open, supplying it. In the near future, they want to revise their legislation that will protect South Korea's national interests, which are the national interests in Korea, North Korea's participation in Ukraine, for example. Moreover, we are talking about the fact that South Koreans today are not just arriving, North Koreans are not just arriving in Ukraine, they are going to gain experience. The last war in this territory was fought as early as 1953, it ended, I remind you, from 1950 to 1953, there was a civil war. Since then, South and North Korea have not taken part in any wars. So, today they are considering a chance, to undergo military training in real conditions and gain experience in the future, fighting against their fellow South Koreans. This is how it is perceived by South Korea today, so it will not stand aside. In other words, the conflict, as it is called, which is called to be found in and in the same China, for example, in India, the war on the territory of Ukraine is flaring up, a third party is already involved, this is very serious, and this is a slap on the nose of the same Biden. If he continues to stand on ceremony and throw in such secret information as Zelenskyy said, then this will not lead to anything good. This once again gives us, Republicans, a reason to say that today Biden, he is not just, going against our own constitution, not protecting our national interests, which is the defense of Ukraine, but he is simply destroying our country from within. Why? Because not today or tomorrow. This is the situation that we are facing today in the center of Europe and the Middle East. It will echo our internal situation, and not only on the economy, but also on the information field, for example, and on many other aspects that will disturb the peace of our society. We do not know what this will lead to. especially since our election affairs are so twisted every day that it is not yet known how these elections will end. And I will add to you that the issue of helping Ukraine and Israel in their wars against this evil, led by the same Putin, is already on the agenda of the voter. And no matter how much neither Harris nor Trump, especially Trump, avoid answering the question of how they will behave in relation to providing assistance to Ukraine and Israel, it is still in the minds of politicians who will decide the fate of America after November 5th. Therefore, everything that is happening today in America is very important today. I have no doubt that Trump, who promised Zelensky's public presence after their meeting, that even if he had a deal with Putin, this deal would never affect national interests, did not mean to the detriment of Ukraine's national interests. This is very important, and I believe that Trump will stick to it.
I would like to believe in this, because various information, especially now in the election race, appears in the Western media. For example, the Financial Times wrote just a few days ago that if Trump returns to the White House, he plans to freeze the war in Ukraine, reduce U.S. participation and transfer responsibility for peace guarantees to European countries. His team proposes to create autonomous demilitarized zones along the border without Ukraine joining NATO, placing on European countries and placing on these countries precisely the responsibility for peace in Europe. Can this be trusted? What kind of information is this? What does this publication say?
Well, let's put it this way. You can change it, remove it from the Financial Times, put the New York Times. Put the Washington Post, it will coincide, no problem. The Financial Times is the mouthpiece of the left liberal West, just as I have already named the New York Times. The Washington Post, for example, is the same thing, put it next to it, and the BBC is also the same thing. So, it is Harris who is defended by the Financial Times. It is these liberals today, my friends, who sleep and see Harris in the White House along with the same Putin, with the same Xi Jinping, with the same Ayatollah. Today, all left liberals, Marxists, anti-Semites and these dictators whom I have already named, they're all on the same side of the barricade. It is Harris who pours water on the mill, they are for her, they sleep and see her. Why? Because the current situation suits them. That is, we should not give the opportunity to defeat Ukraine, we should not. And Israel too. Israel must make concessions to these terrorists, especially Iran. And also Ukraine. No way. I will repeat to you once again. This is the idea that Putin suits the West more than anyone else who comes after Putin. And they say, these left liberals, that there is one whip around Putin. We have known Putin for many years. For more than 20 years, we communicated with him. And that's okay. It is possible to agree. Let's give you what you said. What the Financial Times wrote suits them. Do you understand me? This is the worst thing. Therefore, this should not be taken seriously. This is the bluff that we have been hearing since February 24, 2022. From the first day of the war in Ukraine.
But if this is written in the media, this is one thing. But when a potential vice president, J.D. Vance, comes out, he also says that Ukraine will need to give up territory. He calls Putin's killer an adversary, a competitor, but refuses to call him an enemy, declares that you need to be smart, you need to be in diplomacy. What does this mean then? It's not some Kamala Harris media that wrote about it.
Let's say you are right. You have the right to ask this question and you have grounds. And now I'll tell you from the inside. First, look at the polls, my friends. Trump is not winning. On the same level, somewhere more by 1%, somewhere less by 1%. So far, 4 to 5 days, 6 days before the election, my friends, where is the guarantee that Trump will win? And why is there no guarantee? Because I have said, and I will repeat again, to this day more than 50 million Americans have not decided. And who are they? These are those who do not care about Israel, about Ukraine. They say that we are not satisfied with this. We need any president who is in the White House after the election to address our domestic problems first. This is high crime, high prices for essential goods, illegal immigration, all this else, then you understand me. That's why you called him smart. He's not smart, this Wentz, he's educated, but he's not smart. Today, in my opinion, I have a premonition, he is playing with Trump, you know, that game of good cop and bad cop. Why? Because on the one hand, when this Vance throws this rhetoric out in public, he turns it to these 15 million or more. He says that do not worry, we will not spend your money outside, it will be for you.
And why doesn't Kamala Harris address them?
She keeps saying the same thing. She's like, you know, a programmed robot that this is generally characteristic of liberals, who says, and we will continue to help, doesn't say, she won't appeal. And why? She knows it's wrong.
But the votes of these 15 million citizens are also important.
Yes, wait, but she loses to another. She must then continue. She does not want to go against her Biden. Pay attention, she tries to avoid criticizing Biden. She is trying to stay in the convoy that was proposed by Biden. At the outset, let's talk more about Obama. Obama is in charge there. She will not say too much. She was warned. Hold on like this. We will continue to help Ukraine. But pay attention, she never said a word about help until complete victory. The word, victory of Ukraine, has never been used by her. Never. Therefore, there is only one policy. Here is to help as much as we can, despite the fact that we have talked with you more than once on our broadcasts that a law has been passed to provide assistance to Ukraine in the amount of 61 billion, even on paper. But before its complete victory, there was a new strategy proposed by the Republicans and approved by Trump. It was April 20th this year. So, this does not exist and will not be. Therefore, today the Republicans, I will say frankly, are in a more difficult situation. Why? Because the media, they are 80% owned by liberals. And the same Financial Times that you mentioned, it also works for this public. I'll tell you more. A huge group of volunteers, Labour Party members of the Labour Party, who will help Harris, are leaving the UK today. Yes, they are going to go to cities as volunteers, especially in the swing states, in order to campaign for Harris. Add this to this scale. But how legal it is, we are already hearing voices to check whether our laws allow foreigners to come and engage in this campaigning. True, this is prohibited in our country, but there is a reference to the fact that it all depends on who finances it. If the Americans do not finance it, then they are allowed. In other words, there is a struggle. Let's see what this will lead to and how realistic it will be. I remembered this for another reason, because, I repeat, today there are left-wing liberals, Marxists, anti-Semites, all of them and dictators, including Putin, Xi Jinping and Kim, as well as Ayatollahs in the same boat. They hate Trump and sleep and see that Harris has come. It suits them all. Why? Because Trump has already spoken here and there about his attitude to international affairs in his future affairs. Let me remind you again, my friends, let us not forget this. Wasn't it Trump who told the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago that he warned him in one of his conversations with Putin if he attacked Ukraine? And this was, of course, until 2022, when Trump was president. Then Trump said at one of the meetings with Putin, "If you try to attack Ukraine, I will attack your domes." These were Trump's words. He spoke about it for the first time, and there was no refutation from Putin. The same Peskov, Putin's press secretary, did not find words of refutation. He just said that I would not give out words there in public and so on.
Medvedev denied and said that he, the former president of the Russian Federation, would also attack Washington in the event of such threats. But he said that it could hardly be, since Trump and Putin communicated, if I don't remember the quote, like silk or something he said.
Trump has his own strategy, based, as they say, on softness or toughness, but this is Trump. He hugs and calls friends, but he does his own thing. I do not want to repeat, and many times I have said on all the airwaves what Trump personally did for Ukraine. Why do you think that Trump will be different today? It will not be different, it will be even tougher, even more powerful. Please, I will return you to his speech at our Congress, when we nominated him as the candidate from our party, when he said that we, says Trump, are for peace, but with a position of strength. We will seek peace, but looking through the prism of our military might. This is Trump. What do you think? Do you really have to be crazy to become president, and then sit down with a dictator, sit down at the negotiating table and persuade, and say, "Here you go, take it, and let's not do anything further"? This is not characteristic of any American president. Not typical. Trump is very different. You will see it. This is his last term. God grants that he wins, first of all, and during this period, he is doing what is worthy of the name of our great country. She must be a leader. This leadership has faded today, thanks to left liberals, starting with Obama, and Biden was a continuation, and Harris can, God forbid, become the completion and beginning of the collapse of our country, not only as a leader, but also as a powerful economic power, because Trump has a lot of interesting plans for the development of the economy both at home and in relations with foreign countries. And I can't help but touch on the same Zelenskyy, who did a good job in his plan for the victory of Ukraine, touched the financial streak exactly, you know, Trump, by offering American investments in the bowels of Ukraine, which the world economy really needs today. This is a plus for Zelenskyy. He did the right thing. And I believe that today Zelenskyy needs to throw away all barriers and get closer to Israel at any cost. Why? Because it is Israel that works miracles today. You know, being surrounded by enemies and under pressure from left liberals, both in America and Europe, he still pursues his policy. This is how Ukraine should be. Moreover, the combination of two minds, two peoples, the Ukrainian and Jewish people, would be amazing. I have said and I will repeat again, the Ukrainians have also proved that they are not bold enough. According to UNESCO, but I apologize, the Washington Institute for the Study of War, the Ukrainians have made more than 2,000 inventions for the development of drones since the beginning of the war. This is an example to many countries, and Israel can learn something from the Ukrainians. On the contrary, the Ukrainians can learn a lot from the Israelis. For example, the Israelis already demonstrating a breakthrough in the development of air defense systems, using laser systems that are not available anywhere else. The Americans learned from the Israelis. This is what they have, and there is already talk that the Israeli army will use them by the beginning of next year. This is just an amazing achievement. It will be a combination of the Shield of David, as we call it in Israel, these amazing air defense systems and, of course, these laser systems. I think it would be good for Ukraine to work together in this direction, learn a lot from each other and resist the common evil that Russia is today. This is very important, no matter what and no one, and to support each other. I have said and I will repeat, despite the fact that this does not have a great effect on Israel, from a psychological point of view, it is not nice for Ukraine to support or refrain from a UN resolution against Israel. This should never be done. Israel was, is and will be a friend of the Ukrainian people. This is very important. These latest events show that your shirt is closer to your body. Ukraine needs to think more about who will help Ukraine better and how. Therefore, this is a private issue. I think the Zelenskyy administration is dealing with this issue and will continue to do so. As for America, I repeat, let's do this. First, let's wait for November 5th. This is very important. Even if Trump wins, and we believe he does, we hope he does, he won't take office until January 20th next year. This is quite a long time. Every day the people of Ukraine, the amazing Ukrainian generation, die. Therefore, it is impossible to delay, it is necessary to act in all available directions. On the one hand, the Zelenskyy administration, as he does it, and on the other hand, we, from within, lobbying, demanding. This is what we must do and not stop for a minute.
Boris Yakovlevich, you say that you hope that Trump will win, but if not, is it possible that there will be any protests in the United States? Will there be disputes? Will there be riots, or is there a second storming of the Capitol?
No. First, let's do this. Of course, everything depends on how close the results of the votes of both candidates will be. I am more than sure that the election results will not be announced, as is usually done, literally an hour or two after the polling stations close. Let me remind you, we have a 3-hour difference between the East Coast of America and the West Coast. That is, we must wait for the closure of polling stations in Los Angeles, in San Francisco and in Alaska, as well as in many other territories of our country on the western border. And while the voluminous results are announced, I do not rule out that litigation may arise. I definitely do not rule out that there may be stuffing. They may not be significant, but there will be complaints, and these complaints will have to be considered by the courts. This may also affect the timing of the announcement of the winner. Может быть, они не будут столь значительными, но жалобы будут, и эти жалобы должны будут рассматриваться судами. Вот это может тоже повлиять на сроки объявления победителя. И все же, я возвращаюсь к вашему вопросу, если вдруг так окажется, что Трамп проиграл, во-первых, никаких вооруженных там выступлений не будет. Still, I return to your question. If it suddenly turns out that Trump has lost, firstly, there will be no armed uprisings, remember this. Protests, of course, are not ruled out, and people can take to the streets, but there will be no vandalism or physical pressure against opponents. I have no doubt about it, because January 6th changed a lot. I do not believe that January 6th was a riot or an intention to seize power. This is absurdity and nonsense that left-wing liberals impose on the American Philistine. There was only hooliganism, nothing more, especially since among these 500 people who broke into the Capitol, no one had weapons, neither firearms nor cold weapons. Therefore, it is unacceptable to say that there was a planned act of seizing power. And what about the future?
You know, now, when the Russian Federation supplies its weapons, when their special services work in different countries of the world, then anything is possible. Maybe the Russian special services will also have a hand here.
I agree with you 100%. Why? Because with Putin's fierce hatred of America, when he speaks, it is clear that he does not hate Ukraine so much, but he hates America more, but Ukraine only because Ukraine simply stood in the way of these barbarians who moved on Western civilization. Therefore, where is the guarantee that among those 20,000 Russians who cross the border with Mexico, there are no KGB officers who can provoke at any time, even 1 minute before the start of the elections? You know, an attempted terrorist attack or the terrorist attack itself can easily take place, and Putin can dig his hand in this, and then say, listen, what do we have to do with it, when you yourself are at war with each other? He can talk like that, as he always did, so you are absolutely right, quite possibly. And Iran is the same. Please. Just recently there was arrested a Pakistani who honestly admitted that he was here on behalf of Iran to kill Trump. Please. I remind you once again, all the dictators of the world today are asleep and see that Trump fails, that he does not win, that he disappears. That's what they crave, that's all. Putin first of all. This is the situation we have today.
Boris Yakovlevich, about the other assistance from the United States of America, about the package that was voted for this year, and, by the way, about the strategy to help Ukraine until its complete victory, somehow all this has been coming to us for a very, very long time. Today, too, Zelenskyy said that Ukraine received only 10% of the aid package that Congress voted for this year. And the question is not about money, but about bureaucracy and logistics. And why does this happen? We see that, for example, sending North Korea's soldiers to Russia, well, it somehow literally took a month or two, and they are already ready, and they are already armed in the Kursk region. And why are unions of dictatorships more effective, stronger, more decisive than alliances of democracies?
Well, it has long been known that democracy and bureaucracy are twin sisters. Where there is democracy, there is bureaucracy. And it needs to be agreed, the executive branch must receive confirmation from the legislature, and God forbid, if there is no violation, the judiciary will get involved. That's all there. This is the advantage of dictatorship over democracy. This cannot be denied. But in our case, I blamed primarily my administration for the lack of will. If there is a will, everything will be. Absolutely. You don't even need to send anything from America. NATO member countries and European countries have everything that Ukraine needs. The same patriots. Why don't they give you a Patriot? Why? These 19 NATO member countries that have the Patriot, if they had given it, would have already had, we would not have had any problems with attacks against Kyiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Dnipro and other cities. They don't give it. Will, let me remind you once again. They promise, but do not give. You can promise. Let me caress my ears. It will not seem to the world that we are not like that. You can promise. Understand, this is the whole problem. Therefore, this is shameful for our country. Trump should not do this. That is why we are voting for him, so that he shows the world that this is a mistake, what has happened so far. America is different. America must be what it was under Reagan. This is what we need to show. And we will show it. God willing, we pray and try. This is very important. Trust in God, don't be bad yourself. That's what we're doing.
I want to believe in it. Of course, as you say, we are waiting for the 5th and the results of these elections, but only then we will talk to you and our viewers about what will be the further support for our country so that we defeat these aggressors, these terrorists, and so that the right world wins, and not what Iran is now demonstrating. North Korea, Putin and all with them. Boris Yakovlevich, thank you very much for this conversation, for finding time for the broadcast. I wish you a good, pleasant day. Let me remind you that Boris Pincus was in touch with us. You, friends, be sure to write your comments, put likes, and, of course, do not forget to indicate from which country, from which city you are watching us. Thank you all for your attention. Good news and see you.
Thank you very much, my dears. We will win, no matter what it takes. We will absolutely win, and very soon. There should be no other. Good must triumph over evil.